Hello everyone, my name is Alexander and today I will present to you our paper titled How Libraries Evolved, a survey of two industrial companies and an open source community. This research was sponsored by Arola, a consulting software company specialized in advanced techniques of software development. And I will start by introducing the problem of library update and the basic terminology that was used in our research. So here in this slide, you can see a simple scenario where a client system depends on some external library. We call all developers that develop the client system as client developers, and all developers that maintain the library as library developers. After some time, the library releases a new version, and this process is called as library evolution. And normally, library is expected to maintain backward compatibility. However, in practice, this often does not happen. Library introduces the changes that are called break-in changes, which break backward compatibility. And when this happens, client systems that try to use the new version of the library, they have errors, and they need to update their code. So this process of updating the client system in response to library evolution is called library update. Now, both library evolution and library update can be very difficult and time-consuming for developers, which is why recently there were many approaches to propose tools that would support either client developers or library developers or both of them in their interaction. And when building these tools and when proposing approaches to support the developers, we need to understand how they behave in the context of library update and library migration. What problems do they face and what is the type of support that they need? So now I will discuss the related empirical studies that answer those questions. We classify the empirical studies of software evolution by two criteria. First, the technique. So it is either a developer survey, when authors talk to developers and study their experience, or code analysis, where authors simply look at the source code, at the commit history, and don't contact specific developers. The other criteria is perspective, so either authors consider client developer perspective, library developer perspective, or both of those perspectives. In this table, you can see that most existing studies, they focus on, they perform code analysis, they don't do developer surveys. And also most existing studies, they focus on the perspective of client developers. Relatively few studies consider library developer perspective. We have also identified two important shortcomings that we will be targeting in our study. So first, most existing surveys, they analyze only the specific cases of breaking changes. So instead of asking developers about their general experience with respect to library update and library evolution, they identify specific breaking changes, contact developers, and ask them what was the reason, for example, for those changes, and how do they feel about those changes. Also, to the best of our knowledge, no survey has asked client developers about what makes library update easy and what makes it hard for them, and what kind of support can they expect from library developers. So, to target these gaps, to fill these gaps, we perform our own survey. And those are the main research questions that we put into our survey from perspective of library developers and perspective of client developers. So first, we want to know how library developers perceive the impact of library evolution on their clients. Why do they introduce breaking changes? How motivated they are to support their clients? And what are the ways in which they can support their clients? From the client developer perspective, we want to know first also how do they perceive the impact of library evolution on their systems, and second, what makes library update easy and what makes it hard. In our study, we targeted three main communities. So first, the Pharo open source community. So this is the community of Pharo programming language. And we've chose this community because many people in our group, we are members of Pharo community. So like this, we have the privileged access to the core developers of many projects from this ecosystem. And we also chose two industrial companies, Arola, which is the company sponsoring this research, and Berger. So both companies are the companies with which our team collaborates, And this way, it was also the reason why we chose them, because we have access to their developers and we can ask them to participate in our study. So here in this table, you can see the number of developers that agreed to take part in our study. So participation was optional, and we shared the survey through the communication channels of respective communities. As you can see, from open source, we got 33 developers, and from industry, we got 14 developers. Also, 8 developers decided not to specify to which company they are affiliated. In our study, we also got 18 library developers and 37 client developers. As you can see here, we asked 2 questions also to developers to explain the population. So first we ask library developers what is the kind of software that they develop, and as you can see, majority of them develop libraries. Also 10 developers develop frameworks, and there are also some developers who build SDKs and microservices. So you can see that developers develop very different kinds of libraries. On the other hand, we ask them to self-evaluate their level of expertise, and as you can see, a majority of developers are either expert or advanced, and 3 developers specify that they're intermediate. Nobody considers themselves to be beginner or novice. From the perspective of client developers, we also ask them what is the software that they develop, and as you can see, many client developers, they are also the developers of library. This can be explained by the fact that most developers in our study, they come from open source, and in open source, many people, they build libraries. Also, many developers, they build web software, so for both backend and frontend. They build desktop applications, they build IDEs, compilers, mobile applications. So you can see that developers cover the diverse kinds of software. We also asked client developers to self-evaluate their expertise, and as you can see, also majority of them considers themselves as expert or advanced, 6 developers as intermediate, and 2 developers as beginner. Now I present the selected results of our survey corresponding to the research questions. So first, to understand how library developers perceive the impact of library evolution on their clients, we ask them 2 questions. So first, do they think breaking changes in their releases have big impact on clients? And as you can see, majority of developers, they consider that it is either moderate, big, or very big. Only 1 developer considers that it is small. And second question, how much time do they think clients need to update to the new version of the library? Now here, as you can see, the results are rather inconclusive. So developers have different answers to this question. Some developers believe that it is less than an hour. In fact, this is the most popular option. And but there are also other developers who believe it can be half a day, 1 day, several days. So perhaps this question depends on a specific library and also specific client, so how much of this library the client is using. To answer the second research question, we asked library developers why do they introduce breaking changes. With the questions, we also confirmed the previous study that was done by Brito and others in 2019. So as you can see, the most popular reason for introducing breaking changes is implementing a new feature. The second and third most popular reasons are API simplification and improving maintainability. And after that is bug fixing and other reasons that we do not list here. We also asked to understand what motivates library developers to support their clients. So this would give us understanding how much do they want to have the tools, how much do they want to have something to help them support their users. So first we asked them how important it is for them to maintain backward compatibility. And second, we asked them how important it is for them to encourage clients to update to the latest version. So as you can see, for 8 developers, it is very important. For 1, it is absolutely essential. And also for 9 developers, it's either of little importance or of average importance. There were no developers who said that it is not important at all. From the other hand, how important it is to encourage client to update. Again, a developer is very important, 4 absolutely essential, 5 average importance, and only 1 developer said it is of little importance. Which means that generally speaking, as much as those results can be considered conclusive, generally speaking, developers tend to want their clients to update to the latest version. We also asked library developers what are the means, how can they support their clients, what are the practices that they use. And this was the open question. So we asked them, when you are forced to break backward compatibility, what do you do to reduce the negative impact on users? And by analyzing the answers to these open questions, we have identified 4 main reasons that were mentioned by multiple developers in this survey. So the most popular practice was documentation, then deprecation, automation, and communication. So this can hint to what kind of support library developers can give to their clients and what kind of things they can do to help their clients to update. Then from the client developer perspective, we wanted to understand how do they perceive the impact of library evolution. And from that perspective, we asked them 2 specific questions. So first, how much time does it usually take them to update their dependencies? So as you can see, the results were really different. So for 9 developers, it was less than an hour. For also 9 developers, it was several days. For 11 developers, it was 1 day. So we can hypothesize that it is because different client developers, they use libraries to the different extent, and because of that, it depends on how much dependent they are on this library, how many breaking changes the library had. So there is no single answer to this question. The other question that we ask is try to estimate how often do you have to deal with the task of updating dependencies. And this was rather surprising for us because 17 developers out of 37, they answered that they need to update their dependencies 3 times a year or more often. So this is very often. We did not expect this. 10 developers do this twice a year, and then 3 developers for each of the other option, once a year, less often, or they specify that they do not do it regularly. Finally, we asked, there was one more question that we wanted, important question that we wanted to ask to client developers is what makes library update easy and what makes it hard for them. So those were also the open questions where they could express their feeling. And by analyzing those questions, we have identified also the factors that can be used to support client developers. So as you can see here, the most popular factors were documentation and breaking changes. So if there is good documentation and there are no or little breaking changes, then library update is easy. However, if documentation is absent or bad and breaking changes, there are a lot of breaking changes, so this makes library update hard. So the key takeaways from this study is that from the perspective of client developers, we see that they often have to deal with the problem of library update, and we see that they need documentation and support for breaking changes. From the perspective of library developers, we can see that they want to help their clients to update. So this can provide empirical validation for the tools that would support library developers, for example, and help them to in turn support their clients by providing documentation and by providing support for breaking changes. Now the conclusion. So here are the main contributions of our survey. First, we conducted a survey of library and client developers from different communities. To the best of our knowledge, we were the first to ask client developers what is the kind of support that they need. And as a side effect, we confirmed the results of the previous studies on what is the motivation of library developers to introduce breaking changes and understanding of their impact. We have identified multiple threats to validity in our study. So the threats to internal validity are, first, we ask general questions, which is also a novelty of our study, but it also poses a threat because general questions are not precise and not easy to answer. Also, we have asked many Pharo developers, and in Pharo there is a technique of transforming deprecations. This is a powerful technique that helps developers to update their libraries, which means that Pharo developers could be biased by this technique. Then some developers, they answer both surveys. So because surveys were anonymous, it means that certain developers could answer both library and client developer survey. We do not know this because it was completely anonymous and completely free. However, this could also affect the results. From external validity, because we are members of the communities and because we collaborate with the companies, some participants could know us and could know about our research, which could also pose a threat. Also, we dealt with the relatively small size of libraries, which have no more than 500 clients. Now, this is also a threat, but it could be considered also a novelty, because you see, most existing studies that we are aware of, they only consider the extremely large libraries and extremely popular libraries. And those libraries, they behave differently from the medium-sized libraries. So to our best of our knowledge, there is also no study that focuses on those typical medium-sized libraries. There are also threats to construct validity. So some research questions could not be expressed by specific survey questions. So research questions were more general. Also, most questions had the list of options to make it easier for developers to answer. And those lists, they could also bias the answers of developers. And we asked clients and library developers about their perception of how difficult it is to update, but this could depend mostly on how the library is used. So this could also make it harder to, to analyze these questions. Then there were also two threats to conclusion validity. So the population size was relatively small. However, it is comparable to the other surveys in this field. And because of the small size of population, we did not perform any statistical tests. We only did the descriptive statistics. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will be happy to answer your questions.